Well, here we go. This is my final reflection for Terrace Christian Reformed Church in my stint here covering for Pastor Joel's sabbatical. The final Sunday is coming up. Over the course of time, I've shared a number of these things with the council or consistory already, but I thought it might interest you and help you to hear some of what I saw as I guess, an outsider coming in to some degree. Uh, in other degrees, I'm not an outsider. The One of the things that stands out for me is the interesting conversations that I've had after church. Although I'm usually kind of tired at that point, uh, and so certainly don't want to be talking about the price of corn or the price of logs or the price of nails. The conversations I had often were directly related to the sermon and began with with the person saying, I really liked what you said, or you really taught me something today. For a pastor, that's a very refreshing kind of an encouraging kind of conversation. On one of the early Sundays, there were two very early conversations that stand out in my memory. One was just a casual conversation with a set of parents of, I think they had, anyway, a young couple, and particularly with her. And she was asking a bit about what I normally do as a specialized transitional minister in a church. And part of my answer, or more than some of my answer, would be that I have to come in and my job is to get acquainted with the systemics, the way the system works in the church, and watch for functionality, so where it's working well and where it's not working well, and then what I call surface the issues in a way that the leadership team that I'm working with can begin to see the issues that I see as an outsider coming in. Now, that's a light way of putting it, and it doesn't, it's not easy, and it doesn't necessarily put everybody at ease when I come into a church in that capacity. Some people are often very threatened, and probably rightfully so. They're probably part of the unhealthy systemics, threatened by a specialized transitional minister being brought in. I vividly remember a church, the second contract I ever did, where the classis had said to them, you may not call a minister until you've done a process with a specialized transitional minister. And I remember three older men the first Sunday I got up to preach. And they were sitting like this, kind of looking over their nose or over their cheeks at me, askance, as a writer would put it. And the whole body posture had what are you gonna whip us for? What evils are you gonna point out? Which is why I'm usually careful to not to help people see rather than to point out. Because if I point out, they can just be mad at me. And if I ask questions or ask people to observe things and they realize something's wrong from observing, then the learning is better for the congregation. So I'd been saying some of that, and then she openly wondered if being here in Terrace would be different and possibly even refreshing. I'm here to tell you it was refreshing. To be in a church, I've been doing transitional work since 2011, officially. I think some of the, anyway. So it's very refreshing to be in a situation, have no responsibility to to seek out or see any dysfunction. And what's interesting is that I didn't like it. There's not a huge. There's not. I didn't see anything. So that's kind of nice. And I realize now, about halfway through, I already realized that this was a kind of a restoration time for me after about 10 years of working in troubled churches. So, in answer to her question, I don't remember who it was, I can say this was refreshing, this was encouraging, and I'm glad I did it. As I've been open about, the only downside for me was that I'd been away from home for quite a bit in the year and a half leading up to coming here, and I didn't spend enough time at home in between, and so that is just a burden that I carried, and that Amy carries from her end as well. But I'm definitely looking forward to going home to Edmonton and then being home for a while, hoping if I do anything church-wise, it can be close enough that I don't have to live away. Here are some other things that I've observed. I like your worship. You have passionate musicians and many able musicians. Of course, when you say many, then it sounds like you're saying some aren't. You have able musicians. I've enjoyed every single service and every single uh, round of songs that we sang in worship. Particularly have enjoyed, because of the way I prepare services, is I leave it up to the musicians to, once they've had some notes about some idea of what the sermon might be all about, to leave them to choose the songs. And I love then seeing how the Holy Spirit works between myself and the person picking the songs to produce song choices that perfectly underline, highlight, or reinforce the theme or themes that I'm aiming for that Sunday. That doesn't happen everywhere, and so that's great. The music is led in a way that's not, to use a big word, perfunctory. So your people are into the leading of worship, and it's contagious and it's great. So I've appreciated that a whole lot as well. Within a worship service, I've also learned of you. Um, I've been very cautious about this because often the contexts that I've been in the last 10 years are very sensitive to the slightest change or disruption from what they're used to. And so you helped me see that I might be overcautious on that, in that regard, because I've experienced you as a congregation that is quite comfortable with something going slightly wrong and needing correcting, with everything not being ticky-poo perfect in that sense. So there's a lot of flexibility, a lot of easiness, and of a healthy kind, that I experienced within the congregation when it came to worship. It all began when you clapped when I was first introduced. And I wasn't used to that. I've never had that before. And so, and I don't even know if it's appropriate. So I could have a good debate about that if you wanted. I'm not going to start it now though. So that's been appreciated, and that it's been good for me to slowly loosen up and understand that you are that way, and I don't have to be too concerned about all the details being exactly right. The other thing that really struck me is your attentiveness as a congregation to the sermon. two things happen there. I won't tell you all that goes on in a preacher's or this preacher's head while he's up there preaching, but there were times when the preacher himself would think, oh, this is getting long and this is getting boring, and would look up and people are still paying rapt attention. And so, okay, let's not drop the last three paragraphs. Let's finish what's prepared. That sort of a thought. But the other end of that is when that's intimidating and the preacher is preaching and maybe not very confident about what has been prepared and looks up and realizes, okay, this seems to be making sense to people. This is great. The Holy Spirit must be at work. Let's keep going. So your attentiveness as a congregation to the preacher is stood out and is a definite positive thing. You generally also, along with the flexibility or informality is another way of saying that, are a welcoming congregation. I know of several people, I would watch them make a point of greeting newcomers or visitors or introducing themselves if they thought someone was a visitor. And by the way, you have a fair bit of that where people come for, it almost seems out of the blue, like, and come and attend a worship service just to see what this church is all about. So there's an opportunity there, although that can be fatiguing as well because they don't always come back. That they don't have a sense of commitment just for having showed up once. So they don't come back regularly necessarily, and that can be discouraging. Don't let that discourage you, because even if it's 1 in 10 that stays and becomes part of the church, that's worth it. That's a good ratio. So you create a welcoming atmosphere. You did not see a whole lot of cliquishness or closing the newcomer out or ignoring them. And so good on you. That's great. Another thing that happened early on in my time with you was after a service, I saw a young girl standing beside an older lady that was sitting on a chair. So I went to the young girl and I asked her, I said, is this your grandmother? And she said, with kind of like, her eyes got big, and she grabbed the lady's hand and she said, no, this is my great grandmother. And that became, I was still pretty new, and so I didn't have a directory yet and stuff. And that became a beginning realization that in some of the core families, you have a multi-generational aspect that is important. That a lot of the other churches that I've worked in, basically in all my career, in the whole time I've been a pastor since 1996, the other churches would envy that because they tend to be, now these tend to be urban churches and some rural ones where the kids go away when they get old enough and they don't come back. And the church kind of laments that. It's like, where did our kids go? And so to the degree that you have families staying intact and multi-generations attending, that's a strength. As long as they don't silo, as long as they don't close out from connecting with others, it's a great thing. And I didn't see evidence of that happening. So good on you. I really enjoyed being part of the ministerial while I was here. I've had great experiences with ministerial associations early on in my ministry years. It's in a small town where you learn pretty quickly that you have a lot of differences, probably in terms of what you believe or how you practice your Christianity, but that there's an important role to play in the community by the churches cooperating together for God's glory. and that is true here as well. So that was refreshing to be part of. Still don't quite know what to make of them saying in my first meeting that I was at when they were planning the that first service. Was it Good Friday? I think it was Good Friday. And they were pretty quick to conclude that I looked like I'd make a good Judas. So when I get back to Edmonton, I'll take some therapy to sort that out. But I enjoyed being part of that service, and it was, again, an effective testimony to the community and to the various churches that take part of doing something together for God's glory. A deeper aspect that I've really appreciated here, and I've shared this with, I think it was the council, maybe it was the consistory, but is that your council and consistory take the spiritual side of their role seriously. Again, I'm going to use the word perfunctory. I've been in other situations where the devotions are done with a sense of duty and let's get this over with, rather than what I experienced here, where clearly there's an attitude of there's something to learn here, there's something to benefit from, so let's dive into this. And I particularly will remember one elders meeting, one consistory meeting, where we had just a great conversation that came out of the devotional that was prepared. This has been a long-standing belief of mine, but I didn't get that. But I didn't get to practice it a whole lot. And that is that if you start the meeting as a team, working on your relationship within the team and with God as a team, the rest of the meeting will go much better. And that's basically what I experienced. There's a sense of, it was a risky conversation, so it could have gone the other way as well, but it went really well. So that your leaders take the spiritual side of their work seriously is important. And that includes some people, for instance, wanting to know what the scriptures are for the next week so that they could reflect on them before the Sunday came. That's rare, and that's a plus for Terrace Christian Reformed Church. And that's where I think a couple of people also, the conversations where I had conversations about the sermon after church, that just reflects a seriousness. That's great. And so those are some of my key thoughts. And I have legitimately and genuinely enjoyed this time. One more Sunday to go. And I probably, the way it looks, I'll be able to be packed up and depart shortly after the service is done. There will be cake, so stick around for that. I'm sticking around for that. And then I'll head back to Edmonton and begin to help Amy with our new puppy. That's been keeping her very, very busy because he's a puppy and he behaves like a puppy. I wish you all well. I have high hopes for your ongoing future as a congregation, and I pray that the trajectory, the spiritual growth trajectory that I have felt is happening here continues for you. All right. That's it. All the best, Terrace CRC. By the way, I should maybe mention this in the video. When I leave a church, I leave pretty good. It's been frustrating for people, so that's why I now say it publicly. particularly people that I may have worked closely with, can find this difficult, is that I go back to Edmonton and you don't hear from me at all. But if you think about it from my perspective and then add the introvert piece onto it, because I move quickly from church to church, if I gathered a a list of people that I kept contact with deliberately just to find out what's going on in the church, that that would be a lot of work, even in retirement. So I don't do that. And this is partly comes out of that, as all my life we've moved a lot because my dad was a pastor. And so I've become very good, in a probably bad way, at just moving on to the next thing. So just beware of that. Doesn't mean I won't answer an email if you send me one or anything like that, but I tend to not reach back into my history to check on things. God bless.